Welcome to Bible study at the Central Church of Christ. We're glad to have you here. Particularly if you're visiting with us, welcome. This particular class is on the final stages of a study on church leadership. And by the end of this month, we will have wrapped that study up. At this point, we have concluded our study of the qualifications. The study began with other items of note that are part of knowing about leadership. I remind you again that all of us can apply a lot of these principles to our spiritual growth. So it's not just for prospective elders or even deacons or even teachers or even preachers, but there is a place there for all of us. As I told 2 or 3 people last time that were commenting on the class, this feels very herky-jerky to me. At this stage, we're trying to just kind of take snippets of this and snippets of that are aspects of church leadership, but they don't have much of a connection necessarily to each other. So there doesn't seem to be a whole lot of flow, and that disturbs me somewhat, but I don't know what to do about it. Last time we looked about the notion of the number of elders for a congregation. The key there being a plurality is necessary. You can't have a congregation that has only one elder and that congregation be scriptural. There is no example in the scriptures of a specific number or formula that is followed that says, okay, you plug into this formula, which will include your membership number and so on, and this will be the number. That wouldn't work, would it? Because you got to have these guys with the right qualifications, and that doesn't necessarily follow very well a formula. We looked at the process of decision making among elderships, noting the fact that, of course, the Bible is the standard for all things scriptural. That's where we're to all go when we want to know what God expects of us. But then there are a lot of areas that elders need to deal with that are in the realm of opinion. And so they have to wrestle with those issues and figure out a way to deal with them. We noted that generally speaking, consensus would be the thing that would be aimed for in areas of opinion. I can't help but think at the very core of virtually everything that we've talked about, it all works just beautifully if you have an eldership that's qualified. That doesn't mean that it's necessarily easy, but it does work well. On the other hand, if you have an eldership that's unqualified, that's unscriptural, then very likely that congregation is not going to remain very scriptural very long. And so men who are qualified, who have those qualities that we've been examining, they're not going to end up having real major problems. They are going to disagree, as people will, but it's not going to turn into knockdown, drag-out fights that are going to split a church. It just can't happen that way. But if you have people that aren't following that recipe carefully, that never should have been there in the first place, it may be good Christians otherwise, then you can see what the situation's going to be depending on which of those 2 roads you choose. I remind us over and over and over again, because there are certain things that we keep hearing, and you hear them so much that you begin to think, well, that must be true. It sounds pretty good. Unity is a very big deal. It is a really big deal. Jesus himself made the strong plea for unity. But that unity was centered on scriptural teaching. We are not to be unified at any price. If the price is, okay, let's have unity with these brothers or these sisters, and they are totally off the wall, what they're doing is so obviously unscriptural that it just can't be. There isn't room for unity there. Maybe we can teach them better. Maybe we can persuade them that they need to look at the scriptures more thoroughly. But when you look at all of the numbers, I didn't even bother to look. I will say it's in the hundreds. I know that's true. There are hundreds of different religious groups in our country. We didn't get in this mess because people were following the scriptures. I'll probably bend somebody out of shape on this, but after 6 months of it, you probably will have to go to the end of the line. We have members of the church that are members of the church simply because of the same reasons that a lot of members of other religious groups are members of those groups. Wrong reason. It is not good enough to be a member of this organization that God established simply because that's where my friends go, or that's where my parents went, or they are really friendly, or they have a lot of neat programs. All those things are nice, but that's not the reason why you need to be here. Ron and everybody else. We need to be seekers of the truth. We don't need to be on autopilot where religion is concerned. Why on earth would all of the effort been put into trying to teach people like Cornelius? I use the expression Cornelius type critter when I want to give somebody high praise that's not a member of the church. Because God didn't feel like that as fine a man as he was, and he would be hard to match for a lot of the world. He still wasn't where he needed to be. He wasn't what he needed to be. And so somebody had to go and teach him further. We need to be really careful about this unity concept. A theme that you'll see throughout all of this, along with the idea that people need to be qualified, is that we have such a powerful cultural influence going on around us. Maybe we always have. How would I know? Yeah, I'm old, but I really can't remember exactly what the cultural influence was in the 1940s. I wasn't thinking about it. In the 50s, I didn't think much about it either. Yeah, it was there. Now I'm old enough where I can remember some things from the 50s, you know. But now we have a very powerful anti-God, anti-religion bias in our culture. And they feel so confident that they actually just have now reached the stage within the past year especially where they blatantly come out and attack God. They don't even bother to try to conceal it or talk among themselves. They basically are throwing it in God's face, in our face as his followers, and everyone else. Why on earth, brothers and sisters, would you pay attention to someone where your soul is concerned? And I'm not suggesting these specific ones do it, but you'll get the point. What on earth does LeBron James know about this stuff? Or Stephen Curry? What on earth does Taylor Swift know about this stuff? These people may be highly skilled in their realms, and the ones that I mentioned certainly are. But would you want them operating on you if you had brain surgery? I wouldn't want these guys trimming my toenails. They don't know anything about this. Or another word that applies to where we are in this. I can't imagine this. I can't imagine it hardly, and yet we have people that brazenly call themselves by the title. And I guess because I've lived under a rock, I hadn't noticed this until about the last half year or so. But they call themselves influencers. Influencers. Yeah. Do you see any compatibility or lack thereof with calling yourselves an influencer? Wouldn't you just love to stand up in front of one of these people and say, so what makes you an influencer? What school did you go to major in influencing? Last I could tell from the ones that I've looked at, they got that title because they gave themselves that. Of course, we are all influencers, and God reminds us of that, but that's not what these guys have in mind. So you're going to listen to them about what's right and wrong, what your soul hinges on? What's that got to do with what we're talking about, Ron? Because these folks basically are influencing people's opinions and views, hopefully not yours. We only have one source that needs to influence our thinking. And like a lot of old people, I pretty much exhausted my repertoire when I gave you 3 examples. I started to say, okay, I will illustrate this with a famous movie star. My apologies, I don't know any. If the Cinemax or whatever it is out there relied on lending me, they would have been out of business a very, very long time ago. So I'm sorry I'm not up to date on that for those of you that are into more current culture. But we don't need to let our thinking be distorted by the culture that we live in. That applies to us individually. It also applies to our eldership. We need to have enough depth and roots in the truth that we're not shaken by the world around us. And I am old enough to remember when that was a whole lot easier. In the days of my boyhood, hardly any of my close friends were members of the church. But they had a standard of morality that was pretty much a universal in a small town. I don't know what it was like in other places. Now then, that standard of morality and right and wrong, much less specifics from the scriptures, is pretty much out the window. And that trend is rapidly growing. They're not here, so I can say it without disturbing them, but I will disturb you. You need to be terrified for the effort that it's going to take to prepare your children and your grandchildren for the world in which they are living and going to live. You better be terrified. And you better be doing everything you can to strengthen them. I don't know if a lot of us would be here and survive to the point where we have had we had to live through what they are living through and are going to live through. This is really, really serious business. Our culture is not our ally, they're our enemy. And every time they prevail, that individual congregation strays from the truth and souls are lost. I mentioned real early on that being an elder is a very tough job. By now, if I haven't made very many points clear, surely that one has been made. The responsibility is tremendous. I expect most of us in here have assumed the need for taking our religion seriously for ourselves. How much more when you're responsible not only for your own soul, but at least to a degree for the souls of others. Not to be taken lightly, for sure. If there's an issue of opinion that divides the eldership, that would be one of those things that would best be tabled and come back to another time. Or maybe come back to never. But it is possible to disagree. In my sheltered life, I grew up in a small town that was a college town. I observed in that congregation, made up primarily of blue-collar folks like my family and most of the families there, that if an issue came up in Sunday school class, that it could be talked about, the scriptures examined, and it could be discussed without rancor or fist fights or yelling and screaming or isolating someone who didn't agree with you. I don't know whether it's a change in the times or a peculiarity of that location versus other locations, but a lot of that spirit does not prevail in a lot of the places I've been, including Western Kentucky. We need to learn how to disagree without sinning. We need to learn how to instruct each other in the truth without sinning. And definitely our elders need to learn how to deal with people who are not on track and try to bring those stray sheep back into the fold. And if it is a matter of opinion, at all costs, we don't get all riled up and disgusted with each other over Mickey Mouse stuff like the color of the wall. I'll just resort to crudity on this because maybe it will make the point. If we paint the wall puke green and everybody in here practically wants to throw up when they see it, is that a big enough deal to cost somebody their soul? I don't care how artistic you are or how color fashion your skills are and training. We just need to be careful. And it's a lot of times these Mickey Mouse things that start out that send a congregation off the deep end. So many congregations now have strayed from the truth, and they usually explain it away as best they can, almost always with some kind of tag like, well, we've examined this prayerfully, and we've come to the conclusion. Fine to pray. I'm kind of thinking we ought to. Almost even better, know what to pray for. and what our goal is and how God has said we need to achieve it. It has been my observation that congregations that go off the deep end, it lies squarely on the shoulders of that eldership. That's sad. We mentioned also that an eldership that is open and receptive to input and questions from the congregation will automatically receive more trust and respect than they would otherwise. We're not talking about personal information that the whole congregation doesn't need to know, but we are talking about things that are basically things like finance or expansion or any of those mechanical type things. We also mentioned about the term. I imagine most of us in here tend to think of being an elder as a lifetime thing, but a lot of us in here certainly don't. I've learned of, I won't start to say several, that probably gives the wrong impression. I've learned of at least a few of us that have been elders that are not elders now. It isn't a lifetime appointment. There's nothing in the scriptures about that. This isn't a Supreme Court judge appointment. There are circumstances, good scriptural circumstances, that cause it to be practical and scriptural to step down from the office. Examples of health of a spouse, additional responsibilities beyond which they can engage in and still do an effective job as a leader of the church. There are lots of good reasons for that. I never thought about this until I did this study, but there is a majority opinion, and notice the word is opinion here. There is a majority opinion among the sources, and I tried to read about everything I could find at the time, that when new elders are appointed, that's a good time to reconsider the elders who are there. It's a good time for them to think about, okay, do I still have the zeal for this that I once had? Is my health holding up, or am I really struggling to make this work? That won't be a threat to anybody whose ego isn't involved. But if this is about me and my position, then that can be a whole other issue. In light of what I've said about culture, it's pretty clear how things are going with the next topic, the role of women in elderships. Now, we realize already the role of women in many congregations has changed totally. Yeah, you would be absolutely right. In a lot of cases, if you said, she's a whole lot smarter than he is, she studies a whole lot more than he does, you could say that about me and it would be pretty much true. You could say that about a very big number of the guys in here. Here's a smart aleck question that helps to answer that. So what? That's not what God wanted. Go figure. We can play games with it and say, well, if Eve hadn't messed up, that's probably where this all started. I don't know what was in the mind of God on this. I have no clue. I just know God said, elders will be men. The term, the word that is used there over and over again is male. It used to be that I could say, elders are instructed to be faithful to their wives, and that would cover it. But today we have people that are called wives that are not wives. But the term is still masculine. I know it's not comfortable for some people in our culture, but that's just the way it is. The roles of men and women are clearly defined, and we need to make sure that we don't step outside those bounds. It ought to be obvious, though. I won't carry this to the extreme that I believe this fully, but I basically buy into it probably 80%. Behind every good man is a good woman. There are some guys that have never married and they're still fantastic. So that's why I'm giving myself some elbow room. Those guys won't be qualified to be an elder if they've been single all their life, but they can still be pretty amazing, great servants. The next topic is one of the, in a list of very tough things to do. To me, it is one of the toughest and one of the poorest done throughout the kingdom, withdrawing fellowship from members. In the first place, a lot of us tend to forget what that's all about in the first place. It's like, you didn't do right, we'll show you. We're not going to have anything to do with you now. You do remember, of course, that that's not the point of this at all. The point to it, when you look at those scriptures, basically is saying, as we remove ourselves from them, this is a temporary thing. It's not a permanent thing. And it's to make them miss worship with God's people so badly that they want to return. The goal is to get them back, not to chase them even further off. I've only seen this done less than 5 times. In all but maybe one instance, it was clearly done for the wrong reason. Guys were singled out. They were targeted for stuff that a whole bunch of other people were doing or had done. But they made some elder or group of elders mad. So it was a game of gotcha. That's as unscriptural as it can be. I used to grow apples. Mostly ate them. Gave a bunch away. Then I made some mighty fine applesauce that was put away. We didn't keep apples very long. But even somebody who doesn't know anything about growing stuff knows this. Stick a bad apple in the barrel and walk away from it for a while. And what happens, as we all know, the good apples, being the biggest number, heal up the bad apple, and it's all good. That's an amazing thing, isn't it? We see that all the time. Yeah. No, it doesn't work that way. It's sad, but bad drives out good. There's the manicured yard. It's a principle of life. It's a godly law. Bad drives out good. You got this beautifully manicured yard. I see this yard that's over there on the corner of what and what. I never know my street names, but it's over there kind of close to the overpass where the railroad goes over. This guy's got a little corner lot, and I think he must work for True Green or somebody like that. Really, I think he does. I've seen the truck there like that, and it looks like Augusta, when they're getting ready to play the Masters. You go over there with a dandelion. And leave that yard untreated. And his yard gonna look like mine. Bad drives out good. Weeds will take care of that fine yard of yours. That is a principle of life. We cannot afford to have flagrant public sin in a congregation. Not because we're all such perfect ones ourselves, but simply because there's the matter of influence, there's the matter of reputation. We get slandered enough. We're called enough stuff that's not even true. We have enough slander and libel directed at us as a group of people by people who've never even walked into a church building without having someone plastering their stuff all over Facebook and TikTok, Instagram, and everything else, and skywriting it, and the whole 9 yards. So people can point to us and say, well, look who they got. If you have got a problem with somebody individually, every one of you got a problem with me, there is a scriptural formula here. There is a scriptural formula that tells you, step 1, you do this. Step 2, you do this. Step 3, you do this. If you don't know the steps, sure they are in summary. You have a problem with me, you come to me. You don't tell your friends and your neighbors and your best buddy and the whole world. You come to me and see if we can work it out. Okay, I'm hard-headed. I won't listen. Step 2. You come to me with somebody else. Now we got witnesses. Maybe that can be worked out. Maybe they can mediate. Maybe they can clarify the situation. Maybe we're so deep into it that we aren't thinking clearly. But if we want to, this is a good point for getting it worked out. Step 3. It's brought before the entire congregation. Oh, wait a minute. I hear little footsteps. It's the footsteps of culture. They're saying something. What are you saying, culture? Judge not, lest ye be not judged. Let's don't be judgmental. That's what our culture keeps saying. People that don't know diddly about the Bible, they know that one because they don't want you judging their evil. So they throw that out thinking, okay, I'll throw some scripture at you out of context. I never read the rest of that chapter, but I do know this one verse and I'll make it work. We are not to judge whether somebody goes to heaven or hell. That is not our place. That's God's. But we are supposed to judge the conduct and behavior of ourselves and of everyone else that's a member. Not because we are trying to trap them or snare them, Oh, we want to take delight in their being wrong. Ron, say it again. I want to go to heaven. I figure you want to go to heaven. Otherwise, there's better ways than time and time to spend somewhere else than here. This is worthless if it's for nothing. We can find good people in other places. There's a bigger goal here. Again, I don't have to want to hug your neck when you tell me I messed up. But if I think about it for a few minutes, I'll realize that I probably ought to hug your neck. If the bridge is out, would you not warn me? We need to be really careful about taking care of each other and remembering whose soul is at stake, theirs and ours. I would not like to be in the position of an elder who was part of a group of elders who had to go to someone and say, I'm sorry, but you have made a public spectacle of yourself and you have brought reproach on the church. I wouldn't like that. That's pretty serious stuff. We might kind of ought to contemplate it in that light. And then we should not do as one who told me, after they withdrew from me, they wouldn't even speak to me. Go back to remember what the point of this was, to make them sorry, to make them miss us, to make them want to shape their lives up, and now we won't even talk to them at all. I'm not talking about going to a big party with them and celebrating, but people would walk on the other side of the walkway in the mall and turn their heads. Hello? Nothing. That's shunning, a practice that's done by some groups, but it's not to be done by God's people. We've got to keep our group as clean and as pure as we can, considering the fact that we're all sinners. We've got to watch out for each other. And if we've got somebody that is just off the deep end and will not change, we have got to do what we can to help them straighten out. That's our job. And that job is led by our leaders. Well, I'm hoping they'll turn around. Okay, I'm hoping this fire will put itself out. I won't call the police department yet. Maybe rain will come along, and it is a judgment call. But from my observation, we always wait too late. We always wait too late. It's a waste of time to withdraw from somebody that's already withdrawn from us. And they've gone and they're not coming back. But we don't do this process until we've done 1, 2, 3. And behind the scenes, hopefully a whole lot of people have been working to try to get them back on track. You see me off track, I want you to put me back on track. I do not want to go to hell. I do want to go to heaven. And while I may not jump for joy at being wrong, it certainly wouldn't be the first time. I'll get over it. On that cheery note, I think I'll just put a peg down.